Hello everyone, welcome to A plus BI. This channel is all about complex numbers, and in this video we're going to be solving an equation with square roots. We have square root of z plus the square root of negative z equals I, and we're going to be solving for z values. Are there any solutions to this equation? First of all, I want you to think about this question and then jot down your thoughts, solutions, whatever, and then we'll check them at the end. I'm also going to show you what comes out of Wolfram Alpha. Almost always I try to check my answers against Wolfram Alpha, and sometimes Wolfram Alpha cannot solve it, and I know some people blame the way I prompted and so on and so forth. Anyways, that's a different story. Let's get to work. So to solve a problem like this, I'll be presenting two methods, and my first method basically depends on squaring both sides. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because I have a radical equation, right? And squaring both sides only makes sense. So let's go ahead and square both sides. And obviously, this could be a little dangerous because we could be introducing extraneous solutions. So we have to check our work at the end, okay? And also there's some argument about whether this problem is valid because what do you mean by square root, right? That's another thing we're also gonna talk a little bit about. Anyway, so if you square both sides, something interesting is going to happen. You're going to get z, you're going to get negative z, and then plus 2 times the square root of z times the square root of negative z equals I squared, which is negative 1. Something interesting I said, because z and negative z cancel out. Nice. They negate each other or cancel each other out. And we have this weird product, right? Well, if z was a real number, this would be very problematic. Unless you divide or multiply, unless you multiply 0 times 0. Because if z is positive, negative z is negative, its square root is not going to be well defined in the real world. But hey, we're in the complex world, so everything is possible. So what is the product going to be then? 2 times the square root of negative z squared equals negative 1. Let's divide both sides by 2. So we kind of have like an interesting expression inside the radical because it's definitely not positive, right? And if z is a non-real complex number, then of course we can't even talk about positivity here. Okay, so what do we do though? We can go ahead and try to square root this. We do know the square root of z squared, right? What is that? Well, the square root of z squared is plus minus z. I could also use absolute value, but with the complex numbers, that is going to be confusing because the absolute value of the complex number is a little different, right? Think about it. If I had 3 plus 4i squared, and then that's one of my favorite complex numbers, and you try to square root it, there's going to be two answers. This can be 3 plus 4i, or the opposite of this number, because you get the same number when you square both of these, right? The negative will disappear. So there's going to be two answers with the plus minus. But if I just say, hey, this is going to be the absolute value of 3 plus 4i, that's going to be a real number. But do you know the answer is not real? Make sense? Okay, so make sure you don't use absolute value in these scenarios. So what do we do then? We're just going to use plus minus z, but that's the square root of z squared. This is the square root of negative z squared. To make matters worse, we have an extra negative there. So what do we do? Isn't it still plus minus z? Maybe, maybe not. Let's find out. We can go ahead and actually write this as negative 1 times z squared, and then separate them into negative 1 and square root of z squared. Now we know what this is, right? Hopefully. It's a plus minus z, but this one can be plus minus I. What happens if you multiply plus minus I with plus minus z? You get plus z twice, but don't worry about it. You only have to write it twice. So plus minus iz is going to be our answer. Make sense? Great. So that's basically the answer to this weird expression. So now I'm going to set it equal to negative 1/2, and I'm almost done. Negative plus minus iz equals negative 1/2. Plus minus iz is equal to negative 1/2. And I'm trying to solve for z, right? So what am I supposed to do? Divide both sides. But let's just find one of them because the other one is just going to be the opposite. So don't get confused because we have too many negatives here. Let's just do this one. And basically, I can multiply both sides by negative I. Some people are going to divide by I, but I don't like that. I like to multiply, and it should be the opposite because negative I squared is positive 1. Don't you like that? And here we get z equals 1/2 I, because negative times negative is positive, right? Cool. Now, this is one of the answers, and remember what I said. The other answer is just going to be the opposite. So if this is z sub 1, z sub 2 is supposed to be negative 1/2 of I. So those seem to be the solutions. I say seem to be because we still have to check them by plugging them in, right? So let's go ahead and check it out. We have square root of z and square root of negative z equals I. Now, what is the square root of 1/2 of I? That's a good question, right? Now, to find the square root of 1/2 of I, you can kind of write it in polar form. And in polar form on the argon plane, it's just going to appear here with 1/2 units away from 0, which is its modulus. So it's going to be like square root of 1/2 times e to the power I pi over 2. Let's just do the principal value. We're going to square root it, right? And by the way, I forgot to cut this in half. And it's going to be give me 1 over root 2 multiplied by e to the power I pi over 4, which can be written as 1 over root 2 times cosine pi over 4 plus I sine pi over 4. And do you know those values? Yes, they are the same as 1 over root 2. So when we multiply, we're going to get 1/2 plus 1/2 I. This didn't work. Wait a minute. This is just square root of z. If you do the square root of negative z, which is the square root of negative 1/2 I. But what is the argument for negative 1/2? Negative 1/2 is just going to appear right here. So you can use 3 pi over 2 or negative pi over 2. Either way is fine, because when you cut that in half, that should work, right? Well, let's just, we can actually go ahead and use the negative pi over 2. And then when you plug it in, I'm going to leave the rest to you because I still need to do the second method. So let's go ahead and leave that as an exercise for you. And now proceed with the second method. My second method is actually a little cooler, I think, because first method is kind of like brute force, right? We just square both sides. Nothing interesting about that. Let's go ahead and do this. Since we were able to write square root of negative z squared as I times square root of z squared, we can do something similar for this. This is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of z, which can be written as I times the square root of z. The problem with that is, though, you have to consider plus minus signs. But again, I'm going to be checking one of these. So it's going to, let's just go with the plus sign because it's cooler. And now we're going to take out square root of z. That's going to give me 1 plus I. And then I'm going to divide both sides. Square root of z can be written as I over 1 plus I. And then I can do the conjugate. 1 minus I, 1 minus I. And then from here, square root of z is just going to be I minus I squared divided by 2. I squared is negative 1, so it's going to be 1 plus I divided by 2. But guess what? This is square root of z. If you're trying to find z, you should square both sides. And if you do, you're going to get 1 plus I squared. Hopefully you know that it's 2I. And 2 squared is 4. And this is going to be 1/2 of I. And this is what we found with the first method too, right? And if you check Wolfram Alpha, what do you think? Again, make your guess, right? Of course, Wolfram Alpha says there are no solutions. And why is that happening? Think about it, and we'll talk about it in the comment section. And this brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you next time with another video. Until then, be safe, take care, and bye-bye.